In the headlines, a two-day early voting for the June 4th local elections begins on Friday. The Election Commission expects a higher voter turnout this time around. An April data point for the Korean economy that takes a hit from the ferry disaster. How long will its impact last? We get one view. And Washington and Seoul react to Thursday's announcement of Japan-North Korea agreement on their abduction case, but it's more like a wait-and-see approach for now. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kang Tae-ri in Seoul. Although Election Day in Korea is still a few days off, Koreans headed to the polls on this Friday. For the very first time in Korean local election history, early voting is an option. And we have the day's voter turnout, which stands at 4.75%. Ji Myung-gil has this report.
For the first time in Korea's local election history, a two-day long early voting period started this Friday. Without prior registration, voters can cast their ballots from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Korea time if they are unable to make it on Election Day, June 4th.
I won't be able to vote on the actual day of the election, so I think this early voting system is very convenient.
Voters are only required to show their resident registration card to cast their ballot at any of the more than 3,500 polling stations set up across the nation.
I think the early voting system is great, as it does not require prior registration. And since the polling booth was nearby our workplace, we were able to vote during our lunch hour.
Electronic devices located in every polling booth recognize the barcode on the ID cards and take the fingerprints of voters. But some voters complained of problems.
It was not easy finding our way to the polling booth. I think we need more signs to guide voters.
For added convenience, smartphone users can download an application that provides information on the locations of nationwide polling stations and the list of candidates in the local elections. Officials from Korea's National Election Commission have been dispatched to each polling station to manage and monitor the voting process. Through the early voting system, the National Election Commission expects the voter turnout this year to be higher than it was in the previous local election in 2010. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
U.S. lawmakers are in the process of turning the screws on Pyongyang even tighter than they are now. A subcommittee within the House of Representatives unanimously passed a bill on Thursday that would strengthen existing sanctions on North Korea with the goal of preventing the North from further developing its nuclear as well as missile weapons programs. The bill says the State Department should draw up a blacklist of North Korean officials who are perpetrators of human rights violations. It also suggests the president consider labeling North Korea as a country that launders money, a clause which expands sanctions to third parties that do business with North Korea was not included. And speaking of sanctions on North Korea, Japan's recent agreement to ease its sanctions on the North for reinvestigating Japanese abductions is worrying the international community, but it's taking a wait-and-see approach to the deal for now. Shin Se-min has more.
Japan's deal with Pyongyang has touched off concerns that Tokyo's unilateral lifting of sanctions against North Korea could cripple joint international efforts to halt the North nuclear development. The Korean media is citing an unnamed South Korean government official as saying that the move could have a negative impact on denuclearizing the North. The U.S. has refrained from making direct comment on the possible impact of the deal while stressing the need for clarity in talks with North Korea.
We continue to support Japanese efforts to resolve the abductions issue in a transparent manner.
Experts are hesitant to jump into any conclusions on the possible impact of the deal, as Pyongyang has a track record of backing out of its commitments. As for how the deal will affect ties between South Korea, Japan, and the U.S.,
I don't actually think it will impact the the relationship that much, in part because we have to wait and see if the North Koreans are actually going to do anything, right? I mean, the North Koreans have said in the past that they would work on this issue, and they have not.
Political observers say at least a couple of months are needed to determine how the deal pans out. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Japan and China will play out the next round of their bitter territorial dispute over this weekend at a security forum in Singapore. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is expected to use his keynote speech to urge Japan's allies to work together to counter China's rapid military rise. Kim Hyun-bin tells us more.
At the three-day Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore this weekend, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will urge allies in the region to work together to counter the rise of China, while promoting a greater role for Tokyo in security matters. The call will come when the Japanese leader gives a keynote address this Friday evening, citing the heightened tensions in the South China Sea and East China Sea. Abe's top government spokesman said the speech would make the case for constructive discussions towards peace and safety. China has already expressed anger about the Abe administration's move to reinterpret its pacifist constitution. This speech will only stand to anger Beijing more. Led by Vice Foreign Minister Fu Ying, it's expected to describe Tokyo as a real threat to security. The summit involves the United States and ASEAN countries, including many that are involved in territorial disputes with China, like Vietnam and the Philippines. Japan and Beijing also have their own dispute, brewing over a set of disputed islands in the East China Sea. Attention will be paid to the response to Abe's call, as many ASEAN nations are hesitant to take any stance that may harm their economical and political ties with Beijing. In another discussion that is sure to draw the ire of China, the defense ministers of Korea, U.S., and Japan will meet on the sidelines of the dialogue for talks about beefing up missile defense cooperation in the region. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geun-hye also addressed the human rights conditions in North Korea, commending a UN Special Commission report on human rights abuse in the communist country, saying it's helped raise international awareness about this issue. During talks with visiting Commission Chairman Michael Kirby on Friday, President Park said the probe and recommendations made about the North Korean regime's crimes against humanity were a groundbreaking opportunity to address the problem. The president said a translated version of the report will be completed soon, which will hopefully inform South and North Koreans about the abuses being committed on a daily basis.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. We've been getting a lot of data points which the government and the central bank here say took a hit from the ferry disaster from the month of April. And take, for instance, the Consumer Sentiment Index for the month of May dropping to the lowest level in 8 months. But it looks like the mournful mood did not affect spending overseas. Koreans spent nearly $1.7 billion abroad in April, marking a monthly record high and a jump of 24.7% on year. Experts say although large group trips such as school excursions have been canceled since the ferry disaster, smaller groups are opening up their wallets for international travel, enjoying the strong won as well as low-cost carriers. Last month's ferry disaster is casting a dark cloud, like I said, over Korea's still weak economic recovery. Newly released figures for April show the effect is being felt across all industries, but experts say the impact isn't likely to last long. Hwang Ji-hye reports.
The sunken Seoul ferry disaster threatens to wreck Korea's fragile economic recovery. Statistics Korea said Friday that output across all industries dropped 0.5% in April from a month ago. The agency said the drop is largely being seen in the service industry, which includes the leisure and lodging sector, reflecting lackluster domestic demand brought on by the disaster. But many say the trend won't last so long.
The moderate pace of economic growth comes from the sluggish domestic demand, which is not keeping up with the pace of strong exports. On that trend, I believe the ferry disaster added negative pressure temporarily.
In fact, the nation's industrial output, which is less affected by the ferry disaster, grew 0.1% in April from a month earlier, marking 2 straight months of expansion. Facilities investment also rose more than 2.5%. Still, business sentiment among Korean manufacturers worsened this month, going down for the first time this year to 79 from 82 in April. A reading below 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. The Bank of Korea, which releases the monthly survey, says the slowing Chinese economy and strengthening won soured business sentiment. And with the sentiment remaining sluggish, experts point out that the data for May and June will decide whether the nation's overall economic trend has turned downward. 황지혜, 아리랑 뉴스.
The Korean won traded at the strongest level in nearly 6 years this Friday morning. The Korean won closed at 1,021 against the U.S. dollar to close the week down slightly from Thursday. The won hit to 1,017 won against the U.S. dollar at one point during trading, the strongest level since August 2008, but took a sharp turn on suspected government intervention. We now take you to Korea's southern port city of Busan, where the annual motor show just opened to the public on this Friday. A car is up for grabs every day during the show, of course, but there's more to take as for what to expect for the future of this industry. Our Song Ji-sun gives us a preview.
The bustling city of Busan is now the go-to market for domestic and foreign automakers alike. 1 out of every 5 cars on the road in this port city is imported, the highest rate in the country, representing the purchasing power of Korea's second biggest city. That's just one of the reasons more and more automakers are choosing the Busan International Motor Show to unveil their latest models. Hyundai Motor pulled the curtain back on its AG for the first time, a luxury sedan developed to cater to those with a budget between $30,000 to $50,000 US. Hyundai also unveiled a diesel version of its best-selling Grandeur model to provide customers with more options.
We felt the need to diversify our luxury lineup to retain our customers. We found drivers who opt for larger diesel models are demanding efficiency and practicality. Models made by German automakers are popular, so we launched the first diesel in our luxury lineup.
Vehicles powered by greener engines are worth keeping an eye on. Among the more than 200 cars exhibited here at Bexco, a noticeable trend emerges in the rising number of hybrid and electric cars aimed at lowering carbon emissions. Developing and supporting low-carbon vehicles was one of the major issues discussed during the OECD International Transport Forum held in Leipzig, Germany last week, but the lack of infrastructure is still a concern. Automakers are doing their best to address those worries.
The electricity bill is only $30 when driving 1,500 kilometers per month. We are also equipping charging facilities at parking lots in large supermarket chains, so drivers can charge their cars with much less fuss.
Visitors can test drive some of these oil-free vehicles at the expo, and 1 automobile is given away each day to a lucky visitor. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News, Busan.
Beauty and cosmetic products are no longer solely the preserve of women, and the male skincare market is booming, and it's Asian men spending the most. Data put together by market research firm Euromonitor shows the Asia-Pacific region took up 64% of the $3.3 billion market last year. China had the largest share, with Korea sitting in second place with $635 million. When it comes to per-person spending, though, Korea easily topped the list. Korean men spent just over $25 on skincare last year, which is triple that of Danish men, who came in second on the list. The Wall Street Journal said Korea's male celebrities' endorsement of these products is helping this trend. And now it's time for In the Press, where we look at some of the issues that have captured the attention of the domestic media this week. We now go over to Yoo Rian for more.
Good evening and happy Friday. Let's dive straight into 동아일보 and take a look at the story that made one of its front pages. Now, headline over here reads, Korea's financial services isolated, a look overseas. It's pointing out that Korea's financial market is falling behind compared to other Asian countries because it has been overly dependent on its domestic market. Now, Professor Masahiro Kawai at University of Tokyo here said that Korea should utilize its high current account surplus and invest in countries like Vietnam and Indonesia, regions in the process of rapid urbanization. He also recommended for the European model for Asia to minimize the effects of possible economic crisis in the future. Now, as you may remember, a lot of blame for the deaths of the Seoul ferry disaster were directed at the failure to rescue passengers during the so-called golden time. And there has been a string of deadly fire accidents here in Korea in recent days, and the dailies are putting the focus on the golden time of those accidents as well. Now, the headline here from the 중앙일보 reads, golden time for accidents, 5 minutes. Now, and the map below shows how long it takes on average for fire trucks to arrive at the site of the accident by different regions. Now, the scattered parts in green are aside from the regions from green, the rest in orange and red are where the fire trucks were unable to arrive during the golden time to put out the fire, showing once again how slow Korea's emergency response system is. Now, shifting gears, competition is heating up between Samsung, Apple, and Google, not in the mobile phone market, but in the smart home market. Now, let's take a look at this business section story from 조선일보, and the headline reads, a smart home race, neck and neck race between Samsung, Google, and Apple. Now, a smart home is defined here in the paper as technology that can be used to control and monitor home appliances. Now, zooming in closer to this chart right over here, we can see that the article notes that Apple has an advantage since it only has a single mobile phone model, its iPhone, which means it only has to worry about integrating the iPhone into the smart home system. Now, different story for Samsung, which has a wide range of different models, but still the paper notes Samsung holds the top place in terms of home appliances such as TVs and refrigerators, which does give it an advantage. Now, Google has acquired Nest, a hardware company, to focus on building a hardware network to also jump into the smart home market. Now, moving on, the 중앙 business paper over here also highlights another sector where competition is growing fierce. The headline over here reads, Apple and Samsung's next battlefield, this time music streaming. Now, Apple purchased the headphone maker Beats as well as its subscription music streaming service this week. And Samsung had already launched a streaming service, Milk Music, earlier in March this year. And the move into the streaming market is quite understandable as it is growing rapidly, rounding up revenue worth of $1 billion seen by the graph over here. Now, that does it for this week's look at the stories in the Korean press.
Pakistan's leader is speaking out against the murder of a young woman who was stoned in broad daylight by her family after saying no to an arranged marriage. For more on the story and others, Paul is joining us from the news center. So, Paul, this brutal killing has sparked outrage all over the world, obviously. Can you tell us more about this victim and what authorities there are doing now?
Well, Cherry, her name was Farzaneh Iqbal. She was a young woman at 25 years old, and her only crime was marrying the man she loved. According to police, Farzaneh and her husband were confronted by dozens of her family members after leaving a courthouse on Tuesday in the northeastern city of Lahore. She was then stoned and beaten to death by relatives who had disowned her for rejecting an arranged marriage with a cousin. Farzaneh was reportedly 3 months pregnant as well when she was attacked. Her husband, Mohammed Iqbal, has accused police officers of merely standing by during the 15 minutes when his wife was being killed. All the suspects in the case, except the father who was detained, have disappeared. On Thursday, protesters took to the streets in the capital, Islamabad, to condemn the so-called honor killing, while questioning how such an act of violence could have taken place in front of the country's top court.
We need to stop this barbarism, and I think it's government responsibility to arrest all those people, and it's shameful that only one person got arrested and the rest, all of them who attacked her, just they ran away from the spot.
Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has called the killing totally unacceptable and ordered the Chief Minister of Punjab province to take immediate action and submit a report by tonight. According to the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, there were more than 800 such honor killings in the country last year. However, experts say the true figure is likely much higher since many cases are never reported.
I see. Let's hope justice is served there. Now, let's turn to Washington, where the political rumor mill was running wild this week, and all because of one single tweet. What's the latest on President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and their low-profile lunch?
Well, like you said, Cherry, political pundits have been going crazy over what eventually turned out to be a simple miscommunication on social media. Sandra Westfall, the Washington bureau chief of People's Magazine, had interviewed the former Secretary of State at her Washington home. Westfall then posted a photo of her and Hillary Clinton with a message alluding to a meeting with President Barack Obama at the White House. The tweet was promptly taken down, but not before it was sent out to millions of her followers. Upon hearing the news, many asked for an official response from the presidential office. A White House official did say President Obama had enjoyed an informal private lunch with the former First Lady and nothing more. Westfall also posted a follow-up tweet with a correction. Hillary Clinton has not officially declared any intention of running the 2016 presidential election, but many analysts say she would be a top candidate for the Democratic Party if she decides to run.
Now let's move on to some technology news. Wearable smart devices are, of course, all the rage in the consumer tech industry nowadays, but it looks like Microsoft is looking to get a piece of that pie.
That's right, Jerry. According to an exclusive from Forbes magazine, Microsoft will be the latest technology giant to jump into the wearables market. The Redmond-based company is reportedly developing a smartwatch that's loaded with sensors that measure biometrics such as your heart rate. But one of the biggest revelations, it will be cross-platform compatible. This means it will be able to sync with Apple's iPhones, Google's Android smartphones, and of course, Windows Mobile 8 phones. The bold move falls in line with new Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella's vision to create products that work with across all devices, even from rival companies. Forbes added that the Microsoft smartwatch could be released as early as this summer, but no specific timeline was revealed. If it decides to enter the smartwatch market, they'll face a very steep uphill battle. Samsung Electronics currently holds more than 70% of the global smartwatch market and is already selling their second generation of wearable devices. LG Electronics and Motorola are also set to launch their new smartwatches later this year.
And before I let you go, let's talk stars. The billionaire technology entrepreneur Elon Musk has unveiled a next-generation spaceship this time that he says will revolutionize space travel. Give us the details on this project.
Well, the founder and CEO of Space Exploration Technologies, or SpaceX, showed off an upgraded passenger version of their Dragon spacecraft. Elon Musk made the announcement at their California headquarters on Thursday. Now, the spaceship will be used to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. However, rather than parachuting down into the ocean, the capsule can make precision landings and be reused again and again. The space taxi firm already has a $1.6 billion contract from NASA for 12 station resupply missions, but Elon Musk says SpaceX was just getting started.
Long term, we really want to get to the point where there can be thousands of space flights a year, and ultimately where we can have a base on the moon and a base on Mars and become a multi-planet species and a true space-faring civilization. So that's where things need to go in the long term.
The United States currently pays Russia more than $60 million per person for round-trip space flights on a Russian Soyuz capsule. That price is expected to rise to $76 million by 2017. Elon Musk says Moscow is massively overcharging Washington and says his company can help NASA launch American astronauts into space for $20 million or less. Charity?
All right, Paul, thank you very much for that update, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours. Weather-wise, it was a hot summer day here in Seoul. In fact, I hear temperatures in the capital city broke a 21-year-old record daytime high. Bo-kyung is joining us from the Weather Center for more. Bo-kyung, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Teddy. It was a hot day, wasn't it? Earlier today, daytime high in Seoul soared to 31.8 degrees, which is more like mid-July weather. At the moment, we are seeing clear skies across the map due to a high pressure system from Japan. Well, some relief that fine dust levels have finally dropped to the normal range after 5 days, but keep in mind that they may rise slightly from time to time. Very high UV levels should extend to most parts of the country tomorrow, so please be sure to wear sunscreen and drink plenty of water. Other than that, nationwide rain awaits us early next week. Moving on to Saturday's readings, Seoul hits 32 degrees, while Daegu and Gwangju continue to reach the mid-30s. Taking a look at other places, Jeju tops out at 28 degrees, Dokdo and Mount Kumgang peak at 20 and 26. Well, hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday evening, and I'll be back with more after 10.
Yes, I will see you then. And that will do it for this edition of ARIRANG News at 8. Thanks for watching.